Welcome to the Craftsman Cafe. I'm here with David Brian Stuart, who is the founder of Improv Playhouse in downtown Libertyville. And tell us a little bit about the history behind Improv Playhouse and your background. I'm really interested in how did you get the bug for the arts and acting and stuff like that?
Sure. Well, Improv Playhouse was founded in 2000, so we've been around a little bit. And the foundation for the program actually came out of my work with Players Workshop of the Second City in the Second City. We established satellites, or I personally established satellites in the late 90s, up and down the North Shore and up here in the Libertyville and Mundelein area.
Okay.
And wanted to expand the program into more performing arts related training and development, reaching out to corporations, et cetera. And back then, some of the vision was a little bit more myopic by my overseers, so to speak.
Okay.
And I decided in 2000 with an agreement to buy out my no-compete clause, and I established Improv Playhouse in 2000. Our very first class in this area, believe it or not, was in a little cubbyhole classroom on the third story of another organization here in town called Dance Center North.
Oh, yeah,
and
sure.
we were running predominantly improv training classes for junior high kids, high school kids, and then adults. And we just kind of evolved and grew out of that space. And I think the writing was on the wall. Mm-hmm. And from there, we rented out various spaces. We were a little nomadic for the first couple of years here in Libertyville, but continued to expand throughout the region and established our first space on Lake Street.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Now,
That's your studio now, right?
That's our studio and our offices, and we're speaking right now out of our theater space, which is just south of the tracks on North Milwaukee Avenue, downtown Libertyville. And since then, just incredible things have occurred. We expanded beyond improv classes and improv comedy training to full-blown performing arts training, so we now call it our training center program. And we have musical theater classes for youth and adults, on-camera classes for the same demographic, improv comedy. We run fashion and print modeling classes, believe it or not. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
We've expanded into camps for youth,
okay.
Training and development for corporations and corporate type folks, small businesses, et cetera. We have a theater for young audience program that actually began 2 years ago. We're now going into our third year, so we just finished our second. And we focus on programming plays and musicals that meet the Common Core standards or STEM standards for state ed system for the state of Illinois. We've reached over 30,000 students in those 2 years.
So is that basically in Lake County for the most part, David, or Chicagoland in general?
Yeah, our staff obviously, for the past 15 years has expanded. So we have a sales staff, and those folks actually call on schools, which we contract. We kind of pitch the shows that we're producing and directing, and then they contract with us, and they bus their children into two other facilities that we rent out. One is in Highland Park, at the Highland Park Community House, which is a large performing arts space, as well as the Round Lake Beach Cultural and Civic Center. So they load the kids in with their teachers and bus them out to those facilities to see shows like The Diary of Anne Frank or musicals like Seussical that actually meet the Common Core standards.
And is that more of is that any high schools, or is that K through 8 primarily?
That would be primarily grade schools.
Okay.
Yeah, so the more mature pieces that they might be reading, 6th to 8th grade, would see something like The Diary of Anne Frank. Maybe the younger students might see a musical like Seussical. And it's a wonderful environment. We audition those performers. Obviously, we interview the directors, and we really bring in some terrifically talented young people. The other intention is, in that side of the programming, is to start doing some of the, performing some of the fairy tales that we adapt that also meet the Common Core, but actually put them on this stage here in Libertyville and open it up to the public. So the moms and dads that are out there that are looking for something to do, perhaps during the daytime, can come and see those shows as well.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
I know my daughter Caroline was part of your Wizard of Oz
Right.
show, and that was just phenomenal, and the talent, and she just loved the whole operation, the whole
thanks.
production, I
Yeah.
should say.
Well, she's
so
a
that-
terrific talent.
that
She
was
should register for every one of our classes.
She'd like that, I think. We'll talk about that. Tell me a little bit about your background.
Sure.
You mentioned Second City. Where'd you grow up, and how did you get the bug for acting and stuff?
I grew up in downtown Chicago,
Okay.
and my dad actually remarried a gal on the North Shore, so it was kind of a half-breed. I grew up in the city and was reared in the city. Both parents were involved in the business, so
Really?
to speak. Yeah,
Okay.
my dad produced, and my mother worked for some of the major advertising agencies and recording studios in Chicago. So I was reared in that environment, in that culture, and it was cool because I would go into recording sessions for bands and voiceovers, etc. And so I was nurtured on kind of both sides of the equation. I was very fortunate, had the best of both worlds from that perspective, the best of urban nurture as well as, the best of a suburban background. And I think that really colored my perspective on the outreach for this program, on where we wanted to establish ourselves, as well as the communities we wanted to influence. So from there, actually, my undergrad degree is in communications and RTV film production and theater performance. I performed as a kid. I've been a SAG-AFTRA performer, which are the actors, the two on-camera and voiceover actors unions since I was a child, and have retained that engagement throughout my life.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more about that. I mean, what kind of stuff, what kind of work did you do? And
Oh,
what'd you enjoy the most?
I did voiceovers for commercials. I was in print ads as a youth. That went a little bit to the wayside when I went to college and focused on my degree, and I really got a bit more behind the camera, took some business marketing classes, et cetera, and then focused on the production side of the business.
Okay.
My first job out of school, as opposed to taking the proverbial mailroom job, which was offered to me.
Really?
Yeah, J. Walter Thompson offered me a job in the mailroom. I decided not to do that, and my first job was a third shift, a midnight to 8 in the morning shift at a radio station outside of Peoria, Illinois.
Wow.
In the middle of a cornfield. I think it's still in operation, WTAZ, and it just allowed me to immerse myself in all aspects of at least that side of the broadcasting business. I could do production, I could do news, I was hands-on, I did a little bit of jock work, copywriting in terms of making commercials, etc. Did the voices myself, and then it allowed me during the day to audition for daytime work and even evening productions. So
wow, you were busy.
That really, yeah, I'm always busy. Yeah, that's kind of my middle name, David Busy Stuart. That's the B in my middle name.
Yeah, you are running.
Yeah.
You run. You run hard.
So, one thing just led to another. Was out on the East Coast for a while, got married, was out on the East Coast for a while, and my family, I have a daughter and a wife. My daughter is now in her late 20s. She's in the arts as well. She's a professional violinist, and we moved back to the Chicago area from that work out east, and I just started to network. And one of the first places I engaged with as a performer, because as a union performer, I said, let's call the union office as well as people that I know, and I was hired to be a voice for a radio program that I continue, a dramatized radio program that I continue to be involved with called Unshackled.
Okay.
And Unshackled is produced out of the Pacific Garden Mission in Chicago.
Sure. I know
and
exactly where that is.
It is the longest running radio drama in radio history. They're at the National Association of Broadcasters Convention every year. They're world-renowned international broadcast. That particular, one of those first several episodes that I was performing on, and it's a paid gig, so you're not going to turn that down.
Yeah.
And it's
Amen
it's a union gig. Will Klinger, who was the producer-director, had inherited that job from another friend of mine, Ben Hollis. They produced a show called Wild Chicago.
I remember it well. I remember it well.
Was doing an episode on Unshackled.
Okay.
And I kind of tugged on Will's ear and I said, hey, you know, I'm a young buck back in Chicago. I'm trying to network. Where can I study? Where can I perform, et cetera? And he said, well, you know, I teach at a place that is the training ground for the main stage at Second City. It's called Players Workshop at the Second City. Okay. Why don't you start taking classes there? And this was like 94, 95, way back then. And I took classes in that program. I took to it like a duck to water. I mean, it was just cool. Invigorating and powerful. In fact, for me, it harkened back to classes that I took in college that back then were called creative drama classes, but today we call it improvisation.
Got it. What school did you go to?
Southern Illinois, Carbondale.
Okay. Yeah, all right, you're a Saluki.
I am a Saluki.
All right, man.
Yeah, born and bred, die hard.
That's awesome.
Great communications and arts program. Very kind of a jewel of the Southern Midwest. Really. SIU for years has had a reputation of having a very generalized program, very experimental. So when I was involved in the theater program, for what involvement I had with them, there was a lot of experimentation, and there was a group that I was involved in, creative drama group, called the Glass Bubble. And today, in the improv world, folks get involved in teams, and they're given team names, you know, just like, you know, the Cubs, et cetera, et cetera. Sure. But they have really kind of kitschy, fun team names. For example, we had a team here at Improv Playhouse called Lost Not Stolen. We have a team presently that performs for us, and it's either people are coming up through the program and audition for it, or folks from the outside audition for it. They're called the Liberty Villains. So anyway, we were called...
Apropos.
Yeah, so we were called the Glass Bubble, and we had no clue that kind of the genesis of our training was going to flow into what has literally become one of the more dynamic industries within the entertainment world, and that's training and improvisation. So I'm not sure how we got onto that. You were asking me about my undergrad.
This is free flow.
So
talk a little bit about that industry piece, because I know that's huge in corporate America now. And you were at the forefront of that, obviously. So dig into that a little bit. Sure.
Pardon me. The industry evolved from being, from my perception and what expertise I have in it, being a training ground for actors on the stage, to a methodology to train actors in everything from the film industry, because now so many people are kind of steeped in the improvisation methodology that even directors are engaging the improv process in their directing.
Wow.
And so from a purely entertainment perspective, it was a natural evolution. Because from the mecca that Chicago is, there was a transformation of the art form that spread from here in the Chicago area to New York and to Los Angeles, of course, where you have, you know, some of the more dynamic actors in the country involved in on-camera work.
Sure.
And then now back to Chicago. So Chicago has really become a very centristic location for a lot of the talent that you see on camera today that are now perhaps based out of New York or LA. The training and development side, I had a vision for years. There are organizations that are much larger and much more expensive than Improv Playhouse that are employed for their training and development services. But I saw an immediate need very early on, and primarily because we engaged a lot of small business and corporate types in our classes who would ask us, how can I apply the improvisation methodology to the workplace.
Yeah.
And there was this light bulb and well, absolutely, we can create some programming for local business people, and it was kind of a domino effect. I mean, once we contracted one business person for their small business team or their sales group or a restaurateur for his wait staff, it really kind of all fell into place. And now we're literally one of the go-to companies for Fortune 500, Fortune 1000 companies, especially up in this region.
We got a lot to choose from.
Oh, I mean, it's crazy, and it's such a blessing as well, because the methodology not just trains teams to be collaborative and to work together, but it also builds up the individual. So they can take the methodology not only into the workplace, but they can apply it to their home life or other segments of their life or their lifestyle. And that really, for us, is very fulfilling.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. Congratulations on that success,
oh, thank
too.
You.
That's
thank
wonderful.
You. Yeah.
You mentioned Chicago. I just love your take on, where do you think, how was that born? Because you're absolutely right. I mean, anybody who's paying attention, they can see, certainly Saturday Night Live and stuff like that,
Sure.
where you see so many people coming to the Midwest, Chicago in particular, and being trained at all of those places here, Looking Glass, Steppenwolf, Goodman, Second City, all that. How do you think historically, how did that start? Where did that come from?
Well, sure. Well, the Second City is the big gorilla in the room. I mean, they do everything beautifully and with great perfection. I mean, they're the corporate 10, company. And I believe because of the dynamic of their operation, they have been able to really expand into every segment of the entertainment world. And because of their, not only the dynamic of their training center, but their performance venues, folks come to Chicago just to go there. And I don't want to speak entirely of the competition, but we've had our fair share. Now what I would consider going into our 4th or 5th generation students that may have started with us as itty-bitties, and now when I say itty-bitties, 3rd, 4th, 5th graders, and 15, 16, 17, 20 years later, they're now in the workplace, and they're performers, and they're directors, and they remember their roots. Second City, when I was in high school, there were a bunch of improv performers doing satire and children's shows. Don't tell my former teachers, I think they had an idea, but we would skip out of school and go to Piper's Alley and watch their Theater for Young Audience shows. And these were all, hippie dudes and dudettes, performing for kids. We'd say, hey, let's check this out. Of course, my mother, primarily being in the industry, would go to the club. And from there, I think just really much of it evolved. My mentor, Josephine Forsberg, my mentor in improvisation, was mentored by what many would consider the pioneer of improvisation, Viola Spolin, who wrote a foundational book called Improvisation for the Theater. Now, hence, since then, there have been many improv gurus that have written their approaches to the improv methodology, and most of those folks who have written those books, often that have become bestsellers, have based their foundation out of the Chicago method. The Compass Players, University of Chicago, an improv troupe, Second City, and then there are many other organizations that utilize and engage the improvisation methodology, including us, based in the suburbs. They are predominantly based out of the city, which has 20,000 plus students taking classes all over the place.
It's everywhere.
It really is.
Talk a little bit more about your mentor, Josephine.
Yeah, she was amazing. Her primary motivation for engaging the improvisation methodology was to make actors better actors, engage them in opportunities for creation. So if you were potentially in a bind in the middle of a scene, you would be able to use that improvisation methodology to be spontaneous, to think on your feet, to problem solve, to make a good decision as an actor. We in turn, Improv Playhouse in turn, have engaged that methodology in audition classes. So if you're going out, if you're a young actor or a more mature actor and you want to take an audition for the camera class, we actually employ the improvisation methodology in those classes. So when you get in front of the camera, and you're also in front of a line of creatives, which could be the copywriter, the director of the commercial, or the sitcom, maybe a producer or two, and there might be 2, 3, 4, 5 people in the room, and they ask you instantaneously to go off script and to improvise the scene. Or, you know, we know that you came in to audition for that dolphin at the water park. Now would you please play a platypus? And you have to instantaneously create that character in front of the camera. And that actually happened to me at an audition up in Milwaukee for a water park. Needless to say, I wasn't hired as the platypus, but that happened to me once.
Wow. So, you know, I've heard about the yes and sort of methodology. What are other... Talk a little bit about the training that you provide.
Sure. Well, the yes and methodology, or that principle, is a principle of agreement. That if someone introduces a new idea to you, say it's on your sales team or your marketing team, or it's a HR team, that those ideas may not initially be agreed upon, but the idea is accepted as a potential idea to be engaged with the group. And instead of saying no or yes, but, which is the same thing as saying all the time, of course, which is essentially saying no. The idea is accepted. Maybe not implemented, but you know what? That's a good idea. How can we incorporate this in the group? And if it can't be incorporated in the group, how might it be incorporated elsewhere within the organization or the company? As an improviser, the yes and is the collaborative style of performing. Each player watches one another's back. At any given point during the performance, an idea or a new discovery, which is also a principle, a new discovery might be given, or a line might be engaged in a dialogue. And rather than saying, no, Jim, I don't think we're in the middle of the park right now. We're in the middle of Lake Michigan. I've essentially said no, and I've completely changed the focus of the scene and the environment of the scene. But if I said, yeah, this is a beautiful park that we're in. Let's go running in the park. And if you say, no, I'd rather just stand still, the scene can't move forward. But if you say, yes, let's go running in this park, a beautiful new world is experienced and explored. And it's really that simple. So when we get a student coming in and training in the program, that initial exploration is introduced literally within the first couple of hours. So each class is, or each class that may run, 8 to 10 weeks, so that level runs 8 to 10 weeks. They're generally 2 to 3 hours at length. And after an adult, or even young people get it, boy, I mean, they are just steeped in spontaneity. But when an adult comes into the program, their heads are literally spinning after that first couple of hours because it's all about exploration. It really initially is, and this is where Josephine was coming from. It's not about the ha-ha. It's not about and we have a stand-up comedy program as well, but it's not about the one-liner. because the comedy will come out of the truth that is engaged in the scene.
Engage in the journey.
Absolutely.
It'll come out. Yeah.
You know, when you watch, I don't know what your favorite sitcoms are, and I usually binge watch. I don't have time to really to sit at night and
in the wintertime, right?
And watch shows. But you know, the great sitcoms that are out there, they're actually engaging the improvisation methodology. And we can name them, and by tomorrow they'll all be passé, even though they're Emmy winners. But the interesting thing is that when they engage in the improvisation methodology, there is an incredible agreement within the ensemble, as well as the spontaneity that's incorporated. But in addition to that, you have a very powerful vignette or a scene that's created with which the audience can identify. So you as a viewer, me as a viewer, when we watch and we have a guffaw or a laugh about that particular moment or scene, you may laugh at something different than I will, but it's because we can identify with the truth in that moment.
Yeah, yeah.
And the comedy, the humor comes out through the satire, if it's written and sketched out, but as well in whatever is being presented, you know, through the lens. Yeah. And it's very powerful and it's very funny. So when our teams perform, they get a spontaneous suggestion from the audience. And they engage in a scene. The two of us are in a park and we give one another new ideas and we explore in this park what the journey has been like in our lives as two attorneys that have just lost our businesses. So now we've become trailblazers or whatever the situation is that we've received from the audience. They laugh at that, not only because their suggestion is engaged, but because it's a slice of life that people can identify with, whether it's a loss of job or a divorce or a great marriage or two little kids talking in the sandbox. It's a very powerful dynamic.
And that's where there's no need for the one-liner. You just share the story, right?
Exactly.
So who do you really dig as far as writers or performers in that arena?
In the industry?
Yeah.
Well, you know, the queens of the industry right now obviously are Tina Fey and Amy Poehler, you know, and I saw them in many performances at Second City. When Tina was much younger, she probably wouldn't remember this because I was a nobody, but our youth, actually, our teen ensemble was performing downtown, and we performed with a Second City Youth ensemble as well, and there were groups of other organizations, and she was there as a Second City member, you know, of not only the training center but a performer, and it's just great to see those folks with so much creativity rise up in the industry. So, you know, to watch their programming, to see their development as producers and as directors is phenomenal. Yeah. A lot of their work are those slice of life type programs, you know, Parks and Rec, et cetera, et cetera. So, and we have our own parks and recreation districts right here in the burbs, and I'm telling you, watch those shows, and it's right out of the culture. So, just off the top of my head, you know, those would be a couple of people. I work with so many people in the industry in Chicago that it's just it's a blessing. It's just a terrific enrichment to my own life, just professionally, to be around those people. I don't want to name drop, but there are a lot of folks out there that are just doing terrific work that don't have that element of success as well. They're just doing the work. They're and the reason why Chicago is such a great place to be engaged in is because those of us, and I would count myself among them, we're just hard-working, real actors. And
is that where that comes from? I mean, I'm still...
Yeah, but part of it is the blue-collar edge. But you've got people that, you know, young folk that come in to the city to enhance their training from college and learn about the industry, and they work their chops. They really do cut their eye teeth on Chicago theater.
Yeah.
So when you talk about the big guns in town, Steppenwolf, Goodman, Goodman's been around forever, but Steppenwolf, when Steppenwolf started in that little church basement in Highland Park, they were just working actors.
Yeah.
Gary Sinise, a graduate of Highland Park High School,
Right.
and could drop other names. Rondi Reed, who was on Mike and Molly, which just, wrapped up, and now she's at Steppenwolf. I mean, these are Chicago working actors, and I think the reason why they are gainfully employed, should they choose to move to LA or elsewhere, is because they really do demonstrate truth.
Yeah. That's a great way to put it.
They demonstrate truth. They have their method, but they've gone through the school of hard knocks of how to get there. There are very few overnight successes.
Yeah, there's a lot of grit with
a lot of grit. Sure, you know.
It's a tough business too. I mean,
it is a very tough business. There's a lot of rejection in the business. You go to audition after audition, and then there's that self-circumspection on, why didn't I do good enough, or maybe I'm failing in this side of my skill set, et cetera, et cetera. And it's a hard gig to be that working actor. But those that are the go-to performers, especially in Chicago, you can make a decent living. Whatever decent means to one person is going to be not as decent to another. I mean, they're not going to be making CEO, options and salary.
Not many people are, right?
But they'll make a living, and they can find a significant other, and they can, should they choose to, they can raise a family and raise that family in the Midwest and do very, very well as many actors who are represented by the major agencies in Chicago. This is such a telemedia-centric word. Perhaps not a web-based world. Yeah. You can actually record your auditions, and that'll be shot out to Los Angeles or New York or Miami or wherever the audition tape is supposed to go. And the major talent agencies based out of Chicago often are based on either coast as well. So there's plenty of opportunity. If you love the Midwest and you can survive a Chicago winter, you can make it anywhere. Yeah, literally. Yeah.
Wow, and it's one of those things where I would imagine if you're in New York, LA, or wherever you are, in Omaha, and you have Chicago on your resume, so to speak, that speaks pretty highly.
Sure.
Right?
I think if I was in Omaha, I'd want to be here.
Yeah.
Although I hear it's one of the best places to retire in America.
So, you talked about rejection, and something that came to mind is it's sort of this type of work, the training that you provide, and doing improv, doing acting, and being on stage and having the lights on you, it's such a development type of thing where, especially for the kids, I think about my girls and myself, it's such a great way to build confidence.
Sure.
And not to mention the skills of thinking on your feet and everything.
Right.
But then you've got the other side of that. If you're doing this professionally, the rejection is just brutal.
I think the rejection as a child can be brutal. It's an interesting dynamic. We're very conscious of creating community here, whether it's on the adult side or whether it's on the youth side of the program. So apart from the professional world of rejection, you have young people who register for our programming, and these are itty bitties. These are first graders through eighth graders, even though the program developmentally is segmented, first through third, fourth through sixth, and sixth, seventh, eighth, high school, etc. So we really emphasize the community side of the program as opposed to getting the big role. Young people register for the productions as opposed to audition. We used to audition. Okay. And just audition, and we'll let you know whether you get in or you don't get in. And we felt that was destructive as opposed to being productive in a young person's life. It's great to make it, but that rejection side we did not feel was healthy to our young performers. It might be in athletics, et cetera, but it wasn't like every young person gets the prize. I'm not coming from that perspective.
Yeah.
But we kind of evolved to a registration process where a young person comes in, then we assess their level of development. And even though a young person or young people may not always get the lead parts, and that's our philosophy. You're not going to see the same child be the lead in every single show, because it's about the development of the child as a whole, but as well the performer as a whole. And the reality is, even though, and as a parent, it's hard to accept this, and it's hard for our other parents to accept it, there are no small parts, there are only small actors, and that cliche is really hard to digest if you're a mom or a dad. And I was a small actor. I still am a short actor. But the reality is, when you've got when you're receiving these young people into the program, it's about the friendships that they develop. A lot of these kids have been rejected almost out of hand because they're not athletes. They're a little bit They're a little bit out of water, so they're trying to find their way within the general culture of their school or community. So it's hit or miss. Sometimes you get that child, you snap your fingers and wow, they get it, and then you get the children, they don't necessarily have the talent, and they stay in the program because they have found their community. But they may develop, you never know, into a full-fledged person, human being that's passionate about the arts. Not necessarily about performing, but they become supporters of the arts. Maybe supporters of Improv Playhouse, maybe supporters of the Goodman. Maybe they're on the subscriber list of Light Opera Works or Steppenwolf or the Lyric or Chicago Symphony Orchestra. That, for me personally, is a great achievement, because if that young person develops into a full-fledged adult human being, which they will, and they become a supporter of the performing arts at large, that's terrific.
Huge win. It reminds me of, I think, a huge music buff. I love the arts. I think probably wasn't beating myself up, but for lack of a better phrase, I was kind of beating myself up about not being a musician. I have a lot of friends who are musicians, and I have no interest in it, quite frankly. I just love music, and I was saying this out loud to my mom, and I was a lot younger, and she said, "Don't you worry about it. Every performer needs an audience."
That's beautiful.
And
that's great.
I was like, "Wow, I remember that."
Yeah.
And she's so right. And they need a good audience and a caring audience, and people who are going to support it and go out of their way to support it. I think is critical, because we've got all this competition around here with athletics and everything else. I mean, it's the arts are critically important. Tell me a little bit about the the stand-up comedy stuff, because I love stand-up.
Sorry, we haven't gotten into that.
What's going on with that?
It was very interesting. There are a couple of guys, Dobie Maxwell, Bill Gorgo, who have been throughout the history of Chicago stand-up comedy and Southern Wisconsin stand-up comedy. A couple of heavy hitters, trainers for zanies, etc. And I encountered those guys a couple of years ago, and they have since kind of gone in a different direction in their own professional careers, but I utilized their talents because my vision was to create some synergy between the improvisation training world and the stand-up comedy world. And the reason for that was we were getting requests for it. And these requests were from our adult improv students. They're saying, I like the improv method, but I was kind of the class clown, and I give one-liners around the dinner table, and my family laughs at it. And I said, whoa, let's hold on a second. That's
I'm getting worried just sitting here listening to this.
A little bit different than the spotlight on you with 80 people in front of you and make them laugh, It's right out of Singing in the Rain. So I decided to do some research, and I found Dobie, and we agreed to create a stand-up comedy training program.
Okay. Now, when did you start that, David?
That was, I think his first class was 5 years ago.
Okay.
5 years ago. So we've been doing stand-up comedy for 5 years. That very first class, the end result was a stand-up showcase. So each student, I shouldn't say performer, they really weren't performers yet, but each student had as their task, in front of their friends and family, very friendly audience,
okay.
performer friendly, really, to put on a 2 to 3 minute bit for their friends and family, and it really resonated. It felt really good, and a couple of them weren't bad, and so they started to emigrate out of our program and do open mics around Chicago, etc. One thing led to another, and a year and a half ago, we actually decided to become more of a regular performance venue, at least once a month here, allowing our students that had progressed through any training program in Chicago that had really kind of cut their eye teeth at various either open mics or showcases in Chicago, and audition them, or we would assess them through Vimeo or YouTube videos and invite them to our stage.
So and is that First Friday? Is that
yeah, we call it First Friday Funnies.
Okay.
And my original brainstorm was just to do it for gals.
Okay.
And we were going to call it First Friday Female Funnies.
Okay.
But that sounded like that might offend some people. At least I was told, no, you can't do that.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know. Yes, really.
Okay.
So we had our very first Friday about a year ago on a summer first Friday, summer night. I think it may have been in August. And the place packed out, and it was all gals. It was all females. Brilliant, so much fun. And from there, we started marketing to the general stand-up populace.
Okay.
I still personally love empowering our gal comics.
Why is that?
Whether they're improvisers, well, the stand-up and improvisation world for many years has had the rap of being rather misogynistic, being a world for men.
Okay.
And I think some of that vibe, that energy remains. And I've just always been about giving a lot of freedom and unleashing the power of comedy to the women in our program as well as in the culture. I think it's necessary, and it's showing. You see in the entertainment world more and more folks in positions of power are gals, very, very gifted, and I think it gives a different dimension to perspective on our culture as well. So we try to balance it out. We're not 100%. We're not batting 1,000, but we try to balance out our First Friday Funnies, generally speaking, with 3 gentlemen stand-ups, 3 gals. Doesn't always happen that way. It really depends on who's available. Who's available.
Scheduling. So what time does it start, and what's the cost to get in, and all that?
Yeah, the program overall. So our live entertainment program, First Friday Funnies is an 8 o'clock show, and that can go an hour and a half to 2 hours. It really depends on how many stand-ups are coming into the joint, so to speak.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's a $15 ticket. I think students are less than that. I forget how much. It's 15 and 10 or something like that. We often have 2-for-1s. We're a BYOB, so we've got we have that liquor license, which is nice. And the improv comedy shows are generally speaking, every Saturday night, 7:30 is what we call our family-friendly show. Okay. And it's very much of a whose line is it anyway type of an environment. Okay. There's a host or several hosts, and it's what we call short form or very game-based oriented improvisation. It's very staccato, very quick-witted, a lot of improv games, and some scenes are thrown in, as well as what we call a mid-range or long-form improvisation. So you get a suggestion from the audience, and those performers will perform within an improv structure that may last 10 or 15 minutes long.
Okay.
And it's hysterically funny.
Is there a late show too?
Yeah, the late show is our 9 o'clock
Okay.
right now, and that is what we call for adult audiences, but it's rated M. It's like a PG-13
Okay.
rated show. Occasionally the audience, depending on how much they've imbibed,
How much BYOB
will
they
throw
brought?
in a few interesting suggestions. But the beautiful thing about the program and the training and the improvisers we bring in, they have a very disciplined sensibility. And they use their brains rather than other parts of their anatomy. And they just don't, they choose not to go into the gutter. They don't go
Smart
there.
comedy,
And
yeah.
again, it's not because they feel that they're going to intentionally or unintentionally offend anybody, but it is. It's very smart comedy.
Yeah, that's great.
yeah.
That's every Saturday.
That's every Saturday. Sometimes there are exceptions. So if people go to improvplayhouse.com to the homepage
good.
and they see what entertainment is being offered, they might see an alternate entertainment option, such as one of my passions is radio drama. So what we will do is we will audition for a specific radio drama that might have aired in the 30s, 40s, or 50s.
That's cool,
Could have
man.
been contemporary if we get a contemporary script, if we get the licensing for, say, something like the contemporary Twilight Zone, should we pay those royalties, etc., we might be able to reenact that on the stage. But, for example, we did the whatever year anniversary it was of the War of the Worlds. So we had the original Orson Welles script, the Mercury Theater script, and we performed that on the stage, as well as we take it as a road show to various venues. Right now, we're in the thick of the 75th, I think 70th or 75th anniversary of the Maltese Falcon.
Okay.
So we will engage in the nuances of those characters. So I might play a little bit of bogey.
Okay.
You know, somebody else will
You've
play
done that before.
a little bit here or there. And it's delightful fun. And when the kids, as well as their grandparents come who lived in that era, their minds are blown. They shut their eyes, and it's like reenacting the live radio show. So those are fun. Smaller plays, so we might do an ensemble of maybe 5 to 6 or 7 people actually engaging in a classic or contemporary piece, but that would be up on the website.
So, quick question for you, because I'm very familiar with the Orson Welles piece, but where was that recorded, and where's the Mercury Theater?
There is no, well, there's a real Mercury Theater in Chicago.
Yeah, in Chicago, I know that one over on Southport.
Yeah, right.
Where was that done? Was that in New York?
Well,
or?
Orson was a child prodigy. I mean, his late teens and 20s, and that was the medium. It was the YouTube of the era. It was the Vimeo of the era, and he was brilliant. He's a brilliant actor, and because that was the medium, he would actually adapt classics to the radio stage, so to speak. And those were often performed in front of live audiences, and he would engage the professional actors out of New York.
Wow.
I think I'm not very good with my radio history at the moment. I should probably be better at it. I should
you're too busy
steep myself
performing.
in it. But many of those productions, the old radio dramas, were based out of Chicago on Chicago radio stages.
Okay.
My grandfather, who was my dad's dad, was one of the top entertainment business photographers in Chicago. So he would actually shoot vaudeville performers,
Really?
the original Abbott and Costellos, et cetera, that went through the vaudeville stages,
Wow.
Bing Crosby, all of those people. And some of those photographs are actually at the Newberry Library.
Is that right?
Yeah, I know I'm getting a little ADD here, going in a tangent.
No, this is
but
great.
The
We
radio
need to do
era.
a part 2.
Oh, a part 2.
Because
okay.
we're going to
Excuse
wrap
me.
up here in a second.
All right, okay.
But I could talk to you about this stuff all day. It's,
Sure.
You're fascinating.
Yeah.
So thank you
Yeah,
for
you're
your
very
time.
welcome. Yeah.
How can people find you? Let's do that one more time.
Sure.
Give people the rundown of where they can find you online, when some of the shows are, and let's do that one more time because I think it's really important. One of the reasons I think you're great and I wanted to chat with you because I have a little bit of insight just by virtue of Caroline. I'm like, I need to meet this guy. So I really appreciate you sitting down and taking the time to do this, but I also, this is my small way of promoting the arts, and
we
I think what you're
appreciate
doing
it.
great.
Thank you.
So
Thanks.
tell us a little bit about where we can find you and all that.
Sure. Well, obviously on the web, improvplayhouse.com.
Got it.
We're located in downtown Libertyville is our main office, right across from the Egg Harbor on Lake Street.
Okay.
At least for the time being, that's where our main office is.
Got it.
Our theater is just a block north, just south of the tracks, where the old Caribou Coffee is. We're in that little marketplace.
Yeah, right off
in there,
Milwaukee
Right off
Avenue.
Milwaukee
That's
Avenue.
where we are now.
Yeah. We have training centers here in Libertyville,
Okay.
where we run our regular academic year training program as well as performing arts camps, as well as our Highland Park facility, which is located at the Highland Park Community House just north of Central Avenue, so right off of downtown
Okay.
Highland Park, off of North Central Avenue. Sheridan Road is the address. And then the Round Lake Beach Cultural and Civic Center is a new, old but newly engaged facility for us, and that's in Round Lake Beach. That's a $3.5 million performing arts and cultural
Wow, I
center.
haven't seen that. That's
Yeah,
great.
it's kind of a jewel up there in Round Lake Beach. So we're going to be developing programming up there and
wonderful.
producing some shows up there as well.
So how can people get a hold of you on the corporate side? Should they call you?
On the corporate side, they could call the office.
Okay.
You'll find that phone number on the website, as well as there's a team build link and also an entertainment link. So whether they're hiring our improv comedians for entertainment or our performers for roaming entertainment or any kind of impersonations, et cetera, stand-up comics are for hire. The team building as well has its own separate page and its own separate dynamic. So they'll just go to the website, click the link, they can email us, and
Cool.
they can as well give us a phone call for that.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Well, thank you so
yeah.
much for your time,
Oh,
Dave. It's
thank
good to
you.
see you,
We
man.
appreciate your support.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.
That's a wrap, George. Woo, we could talk all day
Thank
on this
you.
stuff, man.
Yeah,
This is great.
yeah.
Let's do a part 2.